G'day mates, it's a Doctor here, and today I'm going to go over 5 cards that need to be banned in Yu-Gi-Oh! If we want things to be evenly matched at tournaments. But before we go over these cards, I must stress that these are cards based on my dueling experience. So for example, I have never faced some of the meta decks like Altergeist, Dangers, Thunder Dragons, or even Gokis. So if there are any cards among them that are ban-worthy, please let me know which cards in the comment section and why. With that out of the way, let's kick off the list with Monster Reborn. Now, this card came off the ban list in 2018 because Konami did a Lost Art promotion, which, to be fair, was a clever move to promote the uncensored version of the card. But now that it's over, Monster Reborn should be banned again because it's a simple fact that there is literally no requirements to bring back any monster from the graveyard with no drawback. After all, this card has been banned for as long as tournaments have been around, so I think it's time we said goodbye to Monster Reborn, and that its time is over. Next up is Summon Sorceress. Now, this card is in an odd position because it only came out only a month ago at the time of making this video, and understandably, Konami doesn't like banning new cards because, well, they want to sell them. That said, unless they get really out of hand like Nightmare Goblin, then we might be lucky enough to see Summon Sorceress banned sooner than we think, considering that this card is already banned in Japan before it was out for even a year. That speaks volumes how much players can abuse this card since it's not archetype specific, and special summons from the deck, it's like a love letter to all those competitive players who uses any and all abusive cards that they can get their hands on. Number 3 is Sky Striker Mobilize Engage. Some people have compared this card to Pot of Greed, and in some ways it's even worse. Why? Because this card is searchable and recyclable in Sky Striker decks. There is a reason some people will argue that Sky Strikers are the most powerful archetype of this generation, and part of that reason, or largely for that reason I must say, is due to Sky Striker Mobilize Engage. I mean, it's a recyclable, searchable Pot of Greed. And that's why a lot of people will say that even limiting Sky Striker Mobilize Engage to 1 is not good enough. At number 2 is Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, because this abomination needs to be burnt to ash from which it blossomed from in a joyless spring. While a number of people have been upset how Konami short prints this thing whenever it's reprinted in a set, I must say it should never have been printed in the first place, because there are very few cards in the game that can stop this thing, and Ash Blossom shuts down entire games on the first turn because the opposing player is unable to search for cards they need in order to play the game. Instead of demand for this thing to be easier to acquire, there should be an outcry to ban this card, because there is no drawback to using this disgustingly abusive card. The number 1 spot on this list might surprise a lot of people because it's part of an archetype that for some reason never gets mentioned when talking about meta decks, but that card is Magical Musket Last Stand. I was considering putting Desperado here, but maybe that card should be limited like Insector Hornet back when Insectors were in their prime. But to explain how Magical Musketeers operate, you can play spells and traps from your hand during either player's turn, then search for another spell or trap from your deck as long as it's a Magical Musket card. Basically, it's an entire deck with hand traps, and since we know how competitive players love their hand traps, it really baffles me how Magical Musketeers are nowhere to be seen in the meta. Regardless, Magical Musketeers need to take a hit on the ban list for their ridiculous flexibility, starting with Last Stand. Granted, this card cannot negate monster effects, however the fact it can be searched so easily, it can protect Magical Musketeers from your own viable trap cards, can shut down strategies like Ash Blossom preventing you from searching, is why Magical Musket Last Stand is my most demanded card to be banned, and until I say otherwise, Magical Musketeers are the most broken, unbalanced archetype I've ever seen today. Thank you for watching this video, and as I said, this is based on my personal experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! At my local tournaments, so if you have your own ban list in mind for Yu-Gi-Oh! 2019, Please let me know which cards you think should take a hit and why. And until next time, take care, mates.